Many years ago, having afternoon tea with the Dean of Admissions at Stanford GSB, I asked her what the chances were of being admitted in round three to the Stanford MBA. Her reply suggests that she'd been a junior Scrabble champion. Catastrophic was the word that she chose. That year, there were only 4 places still available with many hundreds of applications. So typically, the strategy is don't apply in round three, which is perhaps a neat introduction to Jamie Tim. Jamie is a Stanford MBA for the class of 2025. He studied politics, philosophy, and economics at Durham in the UK, then went on to do his master's at the LSE, worked on Brexit negotiations for the UK government, and then had a role in the Cabinet Office. He has a wonderful story to share. Jamie, I'm not surprised that you caught the attention of admissions, even in round three. It's lovely to see you.
And
That was
you,
just a
Matt.
very brief intro, but if you could share with our viewers, a little bit of the diversity of that background, perhaps even a fun fact about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll just tell you a bit about myself, where I'm from, and then we can do the kind of baseball stats. So I'm from London, England. Kind of grew up in and around London, spent my whole life there, and so interested in politics from a very young age. Obviously studied PPE at university, was politically engaged throughout my time there, worked for the Liberal Democrats during a time when they were not so popular, which built up some of my robustness along with being a Spurs fan. And then I moved on to work in the UK government during the civil service. So I had a load of really interesting, varied roles there. And obviously, it's been, I think the diplomatic word is a turbulent time for the UK in the last decade or so. So I was lucky enough to work on the Brexit negotiations, to lead the kind of chief of staff function for a minister in the Environment Department. And I then moved on to work for Boris Johnson during the COVID-19 pandemic in the Cabinet Office. Along the way, had 4 or 5 prime ministers, pandemic, Brexit, and a lot of fun. But it was pretty tiring by the end.
Now, it wasn't a season ticket to Tottenham Hotspur that was going to keep you in the UK, though, of course, after the last weekend and victory over Manchester United, things are looking up since
Indeed,
to the West
indeed.
Coast. Um, Not many in government and public service immediately think about the MBA. What led you to think about going back for business school and Stanford in particular?
Yeah, I mean, the joke I've been making, or the attempt I've been making to get people to hire me while I've been here, is that there's basically 2 people in the world with a British government background, and one of them is Rishi Sunak, and the other one is me, which is a good line. It's landed okay with some of the employers, but I think that goes to show you that it's a bit niche. There is a bit more of a pipeline nowadays. Kanishka Narayan is an MP who's just been elected to Parliament, but it was actually the very fact that it was not a government-heavy program that really encouraged me to apply. I loved my time in government. I got to do some amazing things with some amazing people, but by the end, I felt that there were some quite big gaps in my skill set and some real like management and operational and business fundamentals that I kind of needed to just take some time to fill in before really taking the next leap in my career. So that was what kind of attracted me to the MBA more broadly. And then Stanford specifically, I mean, I had my eye on AI as the next big revolution. I'm not exactly a visionary, realizing that, 6 months after the release of ChatGPT, but it certainly seemed like a good lead to follow. And, of all the places to go to do it, why not Silicon Valley and why not Stanford GSB?
Right. There'll be many private equity associates, consultants, bankers, software engineers for whom business school is often a next step in their personal and professional development. As you sort of step back and thought about, well, major investment, time, money,
Mm.
and perhaps some of the intangible things that you're hoping to then be able to develop. How has that played out?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think you give me a little bit too much credit. As you referred at the start, mine was around three applications. So there was less sort of stepping back and more sort of rushing forward, I would say. But I think, what I think that tells you is that very quickly and very instinctively, it felt like the right move for me. There was a beautiful mesh between sort of the skills I thought I had and could bring to add to the community, and the skills that I thought being here would give me, as well as the networks that I wouldn't be able to access otherwise. I also have some like fantastic people in my life who've done MBAs, including my loving fiance. Some of my best friends in London have done it, and so I was looking around at the people who loved what they did and loved their time, and got the most out of their lives. And the kind of the consistent thread had been that they'd gone and done an MBA and kind of built up those learnings and used it as a springboard. So it seemed actually like a very instinctive and sensible next step for me.
I mean, for some, it might say, well, it's Stanford, it's a no-brainer. As you actually look at the learning experience, and of course, tremendous efforts that under the leadership of John Levin, now the president of Stanford University, to really personalize the 2 years. So how is the course structured and even the course load?
Yeah, so in terms of structure, you'll come straight in. Everyone does a week course together called Managing Groups and Teams, divided up into 6 sections. It's a springboard to get you thinking about what it's like to work with others, what it's like to lead, and how you can effectively drive forward an organization and build fantastic organizations. From there, you go through your kind of core. Everyone does the same subjects, but it's obviously tiered by level depending on your experience and your skill set. And there'll be the classic things like your finance, your accounting, and then to go along with that, some of the softer, more qualitative skills like leadership laboratory, and like leading with values, which is the ethics class. So that's your kind of first quarter, and the idea is to give you that really like solid foundation. And then from there, you get much more ability to pick and choose. You have what's then known as distributives, where you have to fulfill a certain number of requirements across a range of areas, things like marketing, things like finance, things like operations, but you can pick and choose from within those. So it's a system that's designed to give you both the kind of core fundamentals, but also flexibility. And then from there, it's basically up to you. As long as you can stitch together the class times in a way that works, it's your choice for what you do. Some classes are obviously more popular than others, and so you don't always get exactly the thing that you want, but it's pretty consistent that by the time you're making your own decisions about your course load, people are really happy with their classes, and it's rare to hear people not deriving great learnings from what they do.
Right.
Your second question was about course load. I would say again, it's sort of a choose your own adventure. Even in the core, you can pick different levels, or you get sorted into different levels. Those come with varying workloads. It's not necessarily the more advanced you are, the harder. Sometimes it's even in reverse. But you do have the ability to manage that. And the other crucial thing is that the student culture is very supportive and collaborative. And a big thing that underpins that is grade non-disclosure. So it's the idea that you cannot tell employers what your grades are unless you get some of the top awards. And so that really takes a lot of the pressure off. You've just got to make sure you're learning what you want to learn in the way that you want to learn it, and everything else is kind of up to you. You can calibrate your experience accordingly.
As you run through a list of elective titles, of course, interpersonal dynamics, the famous
Yeah.
touchy-feely is going to be a popular one for everybody, certainly was in the last 45 years. But when you talk about leadership, ethics, you see these titles, and then you're in the classroom, which is where the magic happens.
Mm.
What's been your experience of looking at something on paper, on a screen, and then actually being in that class and discovering and exploring?
I would say that the the teaching and the in-classroom experience has almost always matched up to or exceeded my expectations. Obviously, in the first quarter, when people are going through kind of finance and accounting, it can sometimes feel challenging, but there's some phenomenal professors who really take you through the basics in a kind of clear, comprehensive and engaging way. Obviously, a huge part of the MBA classroom is about your classmates. The caliber is unsurprisingly at the GSB exceptionally high in a way that I sort of knew cognitively, but it's another thing to experience. It's just fascinating to like sit down on a project and watch someone, something that looks like Greek to me, just people just can like, I've got it, and like smash through. And it's pretty inspirational, I would say, to work with classmates with that like raw brain power, but kind of none of the arrogance, I would say, to go with it. The other thing that kind of screams out to me is the caliber of guest speaker that you get. And so, to give you one really specific example, I did a course on sports business management, kind of personal interest area of mine. I mean, how could I say no? And in the first class, I won't say names, but we had the CEO of a major football club, that's soccer, English football club, and then a sort of who's who of all of these luminaries of the US sporting landscape. And I couldn't quite believe that I was getting to basically have a couple of hours to like listen to and grill some of these people at the very, very top of their fields. So that's definitely stood out for me.
Well, welcome you to go back to the UK and still refer to it as soccer. You talk about highly collaborative, there's raw brain power in the classroom. When you then take that outside of the classroom, so many clubs, opportunities, activities. Can you give us a taste of that? And also how they contribute, both perhaps at the personal level, with passions and interests that you have, but leadership opportunities that come hand in hand with that?
Yeah. So, I mean, you name a thing, there's a club and an activity to do with it. The sort of the most active clubs tend to correlate with the areas of student interest. So things like the VC club are exceptionally active, the entrepreneurship club, constantly bringing speakers, organizing mixers, holding hackathons, organizing conferences. So they're just really great vehicles to meet and connect with people, kind of classmates, but also people who you might want to work for in your industry. Because it's a small class, there's loads of leadership opportunities. That's not to say it's not competitive. Like, obviously, with the kind of caliber of person that you're working with, there's always going to be someone who's just as qualified as you, and that means you actually are incentivized to put time into thinking about, okay, why do I want to lead this club, and what would I bring that either differentiates me or I think I can add and drive it forward. So that's been really interesting. And my experience has been, I lead the government and politics club and the AI club, and you can kind of spot the odd one out on which one I'm more and less qualified to run. But the sort of ability to use that as a platform to actually gain access and credibility within a field that, beforehand someone would have looked at my CV and gone, like, what's this? To now, I can go out and kind of approach anyone who I really want to, with the kind of carrot of coming in to meet some phenomenal students at Stanford. So whatever you want, really, there'll be a club for it.
You describe somebody looking at your CV, at your resume, what's this, Jamie? It would be part of the search for the summer internship. And Stanford, always interestingly, among the top schools, it's not this 98% placement 3 months after graduation, but not because there aren't the opportunities. It's looking for the right role, something that you're really, really driven and inspired by. So how does the school, the program, support you both for finding that summer internship and then the subsequent job search?
Yeah, I'd say, like, from very early on, you are given a lot of resources and information and access. But I think the first thing that was kind of driven home to me when I got there was, this is not like an undergraduate job search. This is self-driven, right? You are a grown human being with a career that's already underway. Like, you've got to work out what you want, and we'll give you resources, tools, ideas, coaching, but it's going to be on you to go out and kind of make it happen. So I think I would say it kind of really varies on the type of thing you're wanting to recruit for. The sort of big corporates, in particular, consulting, banking, PE, obviously all pretty popular. Even at the GSB, where it's perhaps less of the kind of default culture, they obviously start really early on, and there's loads of resources around that, both kind of CMC, Career Management Center, and student led. And then kind of as the year goes on, I would say it spreads out a bit more as people start to look at smaller things like venture capital funds, like startups and scale ups. And then it becomes a bit less, there's a posting, I'm going to try and find that job, and more, okay, I want to work in this field. What are the companies that I think are cool, and how can I get them to give me an opportunity for the summer? So it's definitely a hustle culture, I would say.
We hope that Centre Court in the last 7 years and discussions like this with poets and quants proved to be a great resource to find out more about the schools. But nevertheless, you get there, and however much research you've done, something that's surprised you both about Stanford and perhaps also surprised you about yourself.
Ooh, what a great question. So, I've listed off a couple of things which I think it's worth like double clicking on. That's a US expression I've picked up, by the way. I never used to say that. So number one is the access. It still blows my mind how easy it is. Not everyone will respond, but how easy it is to message an alum on LinkedIn or just over email, or indeed not even an alum, and just say, hi, I'm a Stanford student, would love to talk to you about X, and the number of like responses you get back. And that's before you even mentioned that, every class, particularly in second year, seems to have regular guest speakers who come in. And so if it's an area or a person that particularly moves you, you can definitely get that access in a way that I knew in theory, but hadn't quite kind of internalized. I think the second thing I'd say is the balance between competitiveness and collaborativeness. So it's definitely a very collaborative environment. Everyone is really emotionally intelligent, really kind, and really giving. It's also, no one's going to hand you anything on a silver platter. I think there was certainly a part of me that, once I got into Stanford and, knowing that I'd got very lucky on the odds, was feeling pretty pleased with myself and feeling like sort of, I'm the man kind of thing. And then obviously you get here and you find out like that's just the starting line, mate. And you've actually got to really be like constantly hustling and working hard to kind of open the door that Stanford puts in front of you. So it gives you like a great foot in the door, but it's like all on your shoulders. And I think that's both, something that's like a challenge, but it's also quite empowering. And it's definitely a mindset that took me a bit longer to get into, but I'm glad I did.
As you know only too well, the MBA admissions office has asked the same question of applicants in the last 19, now 20 years, of what matters most to you and why. You described earlier rushing forward, perhaps rather than stepping back with your round 3 strategy, but it worked. But advice, as for a school that talks about changing lives, changing the world, and we can go, well, be your authentic self, but trying to break through that high level, almost cliche. What advice would you give to anybody applying to business school, but applying to Stanford in particular?
Advice in terms of how to get in, or advice in terms of whether they should apply? Okay,
applying and hopefully being among those 430 lucky ones that get in.
Yeah, great. So, like, first of all, I would say before you apply, know what you're getting yourself into and know why you're going there. It's there's a lot of advice out there, and I was actually kind of surprised by how much of it was accurate, in terms of the things that are available. But it really is worth just digging in a bit more and speaking to people you can, not to try and get like an admissions leg up. I think people think that, oh, speaking to someone on the inside is going to help me get in. It's not. But what it will give you is a sense of like how it works, how it's going to fit with your personality, and like the things that you love and that resonate with you from those conversations are things that you can then use to apply a kind of thoughtful and authentic application. In terms of the application itself, uh, I mean, the obvious advice and the advice that's always given is just like make it true. It's going to be a lot of an easier story to tell if it is true to you and is true to your background. But I would also say don't think you're going to be like beholden to it, and don't think that you have to say, oh, I'm coming in with this incredible idea to save the world and I'm going to spend my 2 years executing on it. Loads of people don't do that. In fact, my guess is probably the majority is people who genuinely have a real authentic reason for wanting to come to Stanford, that isn't an attempt to change the world, but is just an area that they're passionate about and they're interested in, and they want to kind of follow their heart. So that would be my main advice.
Well, I've been fortunate to follow your story, whether it's in AI, whether it's in government, possibly on the football field. I think you will change the world. But certainly, Jamie, I think you'll change perspectives, or certainly broaden perspectives of the viewers of Centre Court, for all of the insights and the candor that you've shared. Very grateful with such a busy schedule that you're able to join us. Thank you. Thank you very, very much.